It's good to see you over here. All right, I see Kunal from Jamnagar in Gujarat. I see Viharika from Hyderabad, Rishabh from Bombay. All right, it's great to see everyone. Please keep those coming. Please let us know the city that you're dialing in from. We have an extremely interesting session lined up for today, and we are going to talk about migration matters. We are going to discuss a lot of interesting aspects around that, some case studies as well. But in the meanwhile, those of you who have joined us, please let us know the city that you're dialing it from. All right. Hi, Sharif from Delhi. I see Rajni from Haryana. I see Khushi from Rohtak. So you're quite literally from across the length and breadth of the country. If anyone is dialing in from outside of India, please do let us know that as well. We have had a couple of participants come in from different parts of the world. So please let us know the city that you're dialing in from. Hi, Darshan. Good to see you over here as well. Great. So we are 1 minute in and we have around 125 attendees already. So it's great to see all of them over here. I am going to do quick introductions now and then more detailed introductions later. My name is 𝗀𝗲𝗿𝗂𝗏. I'm a co-founder and director at Seed Global Education. We are a higher education firm that connects top universities with candidates and prospective students like yourself. We facilitate such sessions which allow you to experience the teaching, experience the faculty, get information on their programs, and then take sound decision. For today's session, we have George Washington University School of Business working with us for this particular session. We have their faculty, the Vice Dean of Strategy, the Associate Professor of Strategy, Dr. Liesl Riddle, and Susan Kessler, who's the Director of Graduate Admissions at the Business School. So we are going to speak to both of them in a bit. But in the meanwhile, those of you who have come in, please let us know the city that you're dialing in from. And we are going to also kickstart our first poll for the evening very soon. So I see Sirat from Kashmir, I see Anmol from Patiala. Okay, great. So I see around 150 people joined the session. So with that, I'm going to run our first poll for the evening. We're going to start with that at the very beginning. So if you can see on your screen, the poll is live right now. This is about your intention to pursue business master's education in the US. So how interested are you in pursuing a specialized business master's program in the United States? If you're extremely interested, then first is the option for you. If you're undecided, if you're somewhat on the fence as of now, then somewhat is the option for you. If you're not interested at all, then third is the option for you. So please let us know your intention or your interest in pursuing a specialized business master's program in the United States. Great. So I have around 45 responses come in. We have around 160 attendees as of now who are on this call. So please let us know your intention to pursue a specialized business master's program in the US. I'm going to keep the poll open for another 30 seconds. So please let us know. Please do respond. It's always good to see the interest levels of the audience. All right, I'm going to keep this live for another 5 to 10 seconds. And with that, I'm going to end this poll and display the results now. Okay. So great. So around 50% of our audience is very interested. So 50% of those who are in the room are extremely interested in pursuing a business master's in the United States. 39% are somewhat interested. 11% are not interested at all. Surprising. But still not a problem. Hopefully this session on migration matters would give you enough insights and enough encouragement to suggest that you should be one of the migrants as well and possibly look at studying further in the United States. Coming to today's session, we are going to talk about how global flows of people across borders have catalyzed new and innovative flows of human, social, and financial capital around the world. This has transformed traditional ways of thinking around global investment and innovation. If you think about it, there were 16,000 to 20,000 Indians studying in Ukraine. As it is, there are hundreds and maybe thousands of us who live in the Middle East, Asia, other countries across the globe. So all of this has resulted in a global economy, right? This has resulted in global movement of mind, so human capital and money as well. There's so much reverse capital that flows back to the country because of the earnings that people repatriate back to their home country. So today's session is going to be about migration matters, the opportunities that opens up for global business. About our presenter, our speaker, that's Dr. Liesl Riddle, who is the Vice Dean of Strategy and an Associate Professor of International Business at George Washington University School of Business. Dr. Riddle has written extensively about diasporas and development, international entrepreneurship, and trade and investment promotion. She's co-authored the first published study about diaspora investment in the Journal of International Business Studies way back in 1999, so 2 decades ago. She's examined investments and entrepreneurship for over 25 years and has conducted research with communities in the United States, Europe, originating from countries in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. So, I'm sure some work has happened around Indians as well over there. Since 2006, she has led the GW's Diaspora Capital Investment Project, which generates and disseminates learning about diaspora investment and its role in development to assist private sector firms, policymakers, organizations, entrepreneurs, and researchers. She's received numerous teaching awards, including the prestigious George Washington Award and the George Washington School of Business Teaching Excellence Award. With that information and on that note, over to you, Dr. Riddle. We are really looking forward to hearing from you today.
Well, thank you so much, Sanjay, for that great introduction. I tell you, it is such an honor and a pleasure to be here today, seeing all the different cities represented, even Indians in the diaspora, right? Represented here, talking with us today. So it's a real pleasure because, in particular, because India, all of my career, India has been the benchmark. Every country I talk to, every diaspora organization I talk to, they all want to know what's the secret to India's diaspora success and how can we be like that. And so India has been a country I've studied and worked with quite a bit, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you here today, as well as some of the other global work that we've done here in George Washington School of Business. I think, GW is an interesting place to study. And our School of Business is a great place to study if you're interested in more traditional kinds of business education. So if you think about if you're interested in business analytics or finance, like this is a great place to be. You've got the IMF just really literally down the street. I can almost see it from my office. We have an extensive network of alumni in New York. We do career treks, we do events in New York. In fact, we have a whole student team going up to the UN this summer. So we have these really great connections between Washington, DC and New York, if you're interested in that. If you're interested in tech, Washington, DC has become quite the interesting tech megalopolis in a lot of ways. We have incubators and accelerators and innovation districts all throughout the greater, what we call the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. This is all kind of considered one social space, one economy in many ways. Right next door to GW, we actually have a brand new equity and innovation district where we're building accelerators. We're building that kind of dynamism, entrepreneurial dynamism focused around medtech and fintech and what we call GovTech, government technology. And it's just an education tech, I almost forgot. It's just really exciting to see all of the great IT also related energy that exists in this area. So all of those types and more, if you're interested in accounting, there are tons of businesses here. Many of the major big six accounting firms have significant offices here and of course in New York. And so these are places where if you're interested in traditional functional areas of business, great place to be. But I think what I want to kind of present to you today is something a little bit different. It's something that if you're interested in that intersection between business, society, and the sort of greater good for the economy, this is also a really great place to study that, because this is sort of a seat of policy making. And then with our connections with New York, you have also that sort of connection between the World Bank and here in DC, and in New York, our connections in the UN. You also have much more, I think, of a global perspective on business and policy that, quite frankly, you can hardly get anywhere else. And so I'm going to show you an example of that today. This comes, as Sanjay mentioned, this is reflective of sort of my life's career of research. But more importantly, I think for this conversation, these are also ideas and experiences that I've brought into the classroom here at GW because of the openness, I think, to this idea of looking at these important intersections in the economy and society, number one. And number two, because of our strong emphasis on global and experiential learning. This is a business school where we build into the student experience lots of opportunities to work with entrepreneurs, nonprofit organizations, big companies, big corporate names, as well as policymakers to put our business toolkit and knowledge set really into practice. So you can kind of build your resume while you're actually with us. And I'll give you some examples of how this research and this teaching actually led to some of those exact kinds of projects here at GW over my 20-year career here. So let's get into it. First, I have sort of an interactive question to ask you. So please do take to the chat box. I want you to look at this image. And then remember, our topic today is migration. So look at this image and think about and tell me in the chat box, in what way do you see migration, immigration, reflected in this image? What is it about this image that exemplifies, gives you an example of migration? Anybody have any ideas? I mean, there is the obvious one, right, of the fish jumping, right, from home to residence, country of residence, or new home. Any other ideas? Leaving one's habitat into the other, Adiba, absolutely. Getting to, oh, I like that. Yes, exactly. Getting to the less populated area, right? Where there are more resources. Absolutely, excellent. Yep. One fish is moving to the other one where there are more resources. Yep, you're all picking up on the resources issue. Yep, leaving for opportunities. More space, more opportunities. Yep. More space to grow. That's right. So where there's more space to grow, to make an impact, right? Yeah, Deepali, absolutely. Moving from the familiar to the unfamiliar, where you get to explore your potential. I like that. It almost starts off, your statement almost started off to me as like, ooh, this is daunting. But then there's this great opportunity to kind of reinvent yourself. I love that. Yep. Leaving the comfortable people's place to explore a new place. That's right. Getting out of your comfort zone, thinking out of the box. You know what else I see in this picture? What I see in this picture is a look at that fish. Look at the bubbles, right, that are left underneath in the first bucket. That fish, I imagine, and that big leap that fish is making, I imagine that fish prepared quite a bit, right, before taking this giant leap of faith, right? So you can see him sort of, you know, almost imagine wiggling the tail, right? Really harnessing all of that courage, all of those resources that it would take in order to make this big leap. And you can see the fish bowls aren't right next to each other, people, right? There's like this big gap. There is a risk in the movement. And I think that's also an important thing that's recognized here. Other things that people have noticed about this picture is that if you can look at the picture where the bowl, the second bowl is, where the one fish is, can you see that fish is kind of looking up at the other fish coming in, right? That's also, I think a lot of people see in that the symbolism of those that have migrated before, that diaspora community waiting for the next wave. And in many ways, hopefully being able to prepare to receive them, support them, and make their nestling into the new bowl a little bit easier. So we could go on and on and on. I think with this image is a very rich image, but I think it's very important for us to think about this image in migration. I think another thing that I have heard people say about this image, and I think this is an important thing I want to underscore, is that often migration means moving from one context to the other, but then when you look back to the original country of origin or society of origin, you don't see it exactly crystal clear, right? Because of that distance and time. And I think that is something I really want us to focus on today, that space between those two bowls, and how that might be different for migrants in different places in time. I want to take you back. This is my family. I want to take you back. I am the descendants of immigrants myself to the United States, as pretty much all of us are, or most of us, I should say, are. Of course, we have a great indigenous community here in the United States as well, but many of us came from other countries over time. In my case, my family came to the United States from Germany and Ireland 4 generations ago. This is my great-grandfather. Now, my great-grandfather came to the United States a little bit before the turn of the 20th century. And his family came here seeking those opportunities that you were mentioning. They were starving. There was a famine going on in the area that they lived in. And they came to the United States seeking new opportunity, seeking to become something different, as you mentioned, and seeking to become American. But for them, because the language was different, this was a family that came from southern Germany on a potato farm out there. That group, actually, that whole family really never fully integrated into the United States because they had language differences. There was some discrimination that they also faced here, and they lived in a very closed off enclave community in Louisville, Kentucky. That's the first generation of migrants in my family. Now, this is my grandpa. And as you may be able to tell from that, my grandpa is actually in a military uniform. And so my grandpa, being an American-born citizen, actually fought against his father's country. He was a very, very loyal American, only bought American things, even when globalization was in its very, very early nascent stages. He was always very focused on, very much nationalistic, my grandpa. But my grandpa did not want to talk about Germany at all. To him, and not just because of the war, to him, because of his family coming from a farm, coming from places where they weren't accepted in the United States, he wanted to just break with them and wanted to focus on his future. That's my father, the 3rd generation. And yes, I'm embarrassed to say that's me at 16 years old. My dad is dragging me out to another German ethnic festival because my father loved his heritage dearly. Made me study German. He studied German. He had played German music in the household. I could go on. And so it was a very different experience. For him, it was quite nostalgic. He wanted to be involved in German organizations in the United States and back home. But in those days, in the 60s and 70s, when he was a young man, there weren't all the ways that he could connect as a diasporan back to his country of origin as we have today. More on that in a minute. But when I went to graduate school and I was studying sort of the social psychology of migration in the world, at that time, the sort of prevailing theory that described the immigrant experience in any country over generations was called the law of migrants' 3rd generation return. And I realized my family actually exemplified the 20th century experience with migration, where the 1st generation made, just like that fish, that very risky, very dramatic, large leap to another bowl very far away with very few other people there waiting. But when they got to the bowl and started to try to recreate themselves, they really weren't well assimilated into society, despite their best efforts. But it's the next generation that was very much assimilated, did feel part of sort of the American story, but they did that by turning their back on their heritage. And that was sort of perceived in this theory as sort of a survival technique. But the theory also talked about this idea that it's the 3rd generation that reimagines the homeland in a very nostalgic way. Now that there is security, economic and social security in the family that doesn't question the allegiances or the value of that particular individual, that third generation then reimagines the past. And this theory predominated our thought in the 20th century around this idea that when one crosses a border, it's all about leaving the origin culture, joining the destination culture, and assimilating. But yet still by the third generation, at least maybe looking back at that heritage and holding it up in some sort of nostalgic, but maybe not very much a real way. And that was my experience. I'm a fourth generation. I don't consider myself German at all, but I find myself absolutely captivated with the idea of being attached to an economy and a society like my father had never seen Germany, not until right before his death. But he imagined and was very dedicated to that space. But in the 20th century and today, as we open up our newspapers, people leave their countries for different reasons. Now, many of you talked about in your comments, you talked about pull factors, the reasons why people leave, right? People are pulled because they're seeking opportunity. They're pulled out of their country into the new country, seeking opportunity and safety, stability, and freedom. But many are actually leaving and pushed out because of poverty, fear, disasters, and unemployment. But the experience of my family is not what's going on today. It's not, the theory is no longer relevant for a world that has experienced globalization. Globalization has dramatically, in my lifetime, really affected the psychosocial and economic impact of migration. Because now when someone leaves an origin country, that fishbowl on the left, and they go to that destination country on the right, transportation advances make it much cheaper and easier to move across countries. When I was growing up, people could not afford to call, much less get on a plane and travel to another country. It was out of reach for most people, and not so much so today, because of those not only transportation advances, but also communication advances. Obviously, there's global media. We can see, we can wake up, we can stay up all night, we can stay in touch with actually what's happening on the ground. Increasingly, global media has grown to not just be national media to national media, but we can actually get access to very low levels of village level media through the internet. And I think that's also had a very big impact in being able to be away, but still feel a part of what's going on. Obviously, with globalization, the decrease in trade and investment barriers means that money can flow in both directions, both for products and services, as well as for investment dollars. And really this rise in non-governmental organizations that really characterized the 1990s globally has also given space in many societies, most societies, for these organizations to cultivate that affinity for the country of origin. We have all kinds, of course, of organizations here in the United States, many of them headquartered here in Washington, D.C. for diaspora groups of one kind or the other. But here's the really important point, and that is, it's not just that you can sit in the country of residence and stay in contact in the country of origin. It's this idea now that there are mechanisms through which you can return back to the country of origin, either permanently, go abroad for a while, come back, like for education, or temporarily, where you're going to go abroad and then come back, and maybe you circular migrate between two spaces, right? Or you just go back for a period of time, set up a business for the family or a friend or others, sell it off or pass it off, and then come back to where you were in country of residence. Or maybe a new country if you take up different residence in somewhere else. But most importantly, I think many people on a daily basis are returning in a virtual world. And this has had a huge impact in terms of the way that migration has impacted the global economy. So the first takeaway from this talk, I think, is really that migration matters to those that move in a fundamentally new way across borders, thanks to globalization. Thanks to globalization, at the end of the 20th century, we witnessed one of the largest global movements of people in the history of the world. I think many younger generations take this for granted because many of the younger generations have grown up in this period of easy cross-border movement. But we have to remember that this is still a relatively very new phenomenon. Migration, international migration, more than doubled between 1975 and 2000. Now let's take a look at some of these important statistics. So this comes from the World Migration Report that the UN puts out. Just look at the changes in this graphic between 2000 at the beginning of the pandemic and today. The estimated number of international migrants is up to 281 million. The percent of the population in the world that is living outside their country where they were born is 3.6%. A little less than half are female. About 15% or so are children. But going down to global international remittances, I'll come back to that. Check those capital flows out, right? A lot of that growth is due to the, to the COVID and the great need abroad, but it definitely speaks to the power in a crisis, as well as in peacetime, of money moving across borders. The number of refugees reported here does not take into account Ukraine at all. So just imagine how much refugee migration this year is going to witness relative to years past, if that was where we were going to be before Ukraine began, as well as the number of displaced persons. So this is a phenomenon that we in international business really can't stand to not take into account when we're thinking about the global economy. Here is also from the migration report, the top 20 destinations on the left, where migrants are going, and origins on the right. Now, you may not be surprised by that, right? We're hoping that you'll become a diasporan, at least temporarily, to come and study at George Washington University and join those very numbers. But I do think it's interesting to take a look at what kind of countries are on the left and what kind of countries on the right. There's still an awful lot of corridors that are moving between the rest of the world and the United States, but also in Western countries, but also to countries like the Saudi Arabia, the Russian Federation, UAE. We have all kinds of really interesting corridor flows going on in the world today. Where are Indians going? Well, you may know this already, but the top 5 destinations for Indians abroad, UAE is number 1, with the US number 2. Not too far behind, as well as Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Oman. But that migration at the national level, I think, belies a truth around where are those migrants really going. It also doesn't tell the story of great internal country migration and how money moves within countries, particularly very large countries. With lots of mobility in the labor force. This is a graphic that shows you today the net migration flows that occurred in US major cities around our country between 2010 and 2019 per 10,000 population. And if you can see this on your screen clearly enough, the light blue is international and the green is domestic. And if you can look right here, I didn't actually highlight it, but I'm going to try to put my cursor on it here. Right here in the middle is Washington, D.C., has one of the largest international inflows during this period and still today than anywhere else in the country. The only places that really kind of beat it are places like San Jose, which is Silicon Valley, Miami, which has a ton of inflow, in particular from Latin America, but also around the world. So that is, in Boston, I should say, another big sort of migration metroplex. So I think that it's important to think about, when we think about these flows, to not only think about its economic impact at the national level, but when we look at flows of money, flows of capital, we also have to think about within the country, where is that going? Because it's usually not equitably distributed. So migration matters to a significantly large number of people who've moved across national borders is the second takeaway. Now, we are talking about the United States, and I think that this is, we have to be real about how ideas around immigration have changed and varied over time, and ask ourselves why. So this was a very interesting study. Now, this is a 2017 study. It hasn't been replicated yet, unfortunately, but it does show a political divide. I think there's often a takeaway abroad that increasingly America has become anti-immigration. And I think it's important, I want to draw a picture for you here, that it's actually a very complex story. In fact, the vibrance and the welcoming and the appreciation of migrants in the United States is still very high among certain percentages of the population. And it tends to fall on these party lines. Now, this is the percent saying immigration strengthens the United States. And I think what's interesting is you can see a huge change that occurred in the country between 2006 and 2016. But if you take the average, it's still the majority of the people thinks that it strengthens the United States. And so that's a point I want to underscore here. But we do have a bit of a tension, like every country does, around that issue. Now let's look at this though. We have to ask the question: what's going on here? Why is this? And I think this is probably one of the most powerful graphics that explains what's going on with migration in terms of migration attitudes around the world. It's a little bit of a complicated graph, so let me walk you through it. The x-axis is gross domestic product, right? The size of the economy averaged out per person at what we call purchasing power parity. So we're not accounting, we're keeping all the sort of the value of the various currencies, for example, equal. So we're kind of putting every country's economy on a level playing field in that way. And what we're looking at in the x-axis is that percent change. Did the economy grow or did it decline between 2011 and 2015, the very years that kind of lead up to that last graphic I just showed you? On the y-axis, we have the statement that people either agreed or disagreed with. Globalization is a force for good. This is the percent agreeing in 2016. The size of these particular circles represents the size of the economy, the GDP overall. And you can kind of see that represented in the legend. But the colors represent a very important statistic, the percent of foreign born. The darker colors represent a large percentage of foreign born, meaning immigrants, migrants in the economy. So now knowing that, what this means is countries that are up here in the right-hand quadrant, where it's high in terms of percent change, meaning there's a lot of growth in that period, economic growth in that period, and it's high for the larger percentage of people agreeing that globalization is a force for good. What color are those circles? And you can see it's that there is a smaller number of migrants, but they've grown a whole lot. What's interesting about this, I think, is that you have countries that are all along that spectrum in very interesting ways. Look at the UAE. This is one of the reasons why the UAE, I think, is such a welcoming place. It's a place where there has been a lot of growth, but also a place where there is a large number, as we know, of a corridor of migrant workers in the country. The United States sits here, not a whole lot of growth, a little bit, sort of moderate level growth during that period of time. And a smaller number that that had agreed with that in that period, but that's reflected by the percent of foreign-born. But I think what's interesting about these statistics is that they don't really reveal, they're sort of general population statistics, but they don't really reveal what people think in the business world. And I think that's another sort of, I think, granular sort of characteristic about our economy that's often not well understood abroad. One of the studies that I did here with some students actually about the return on investment for migration, what's in it for business, actually went out and talked to business leaders about what do they think their firms gain, if anything, by hiring those that come from other countries. And I think the results were really interesting. The majority of people that we interviewed, and we interviewed top CEOs, C-suite folks, as well as HR hiring managers, we were really astounded. Their answers were very strong and positive in terms of, we love hiring folks from outside this country, mostly because of the great innovation and thought process that they bring to our country. And that was true, it held across many different countries, including the United States, because recruitment and retention, they stay with us longer. The innovations that they bring us in terms of innovative work teams and product and service innovation, as well as helping us expand markets. So I think this is an important fact to underscore, that although there's a lot in the media about how people feel about migrants, I want you to know that we have empirical evidence that shows the business community thinks very, very different. So migration matters in different ways to different groups of people. Now I want to turn a little bit to this word diaspora, and I want to kind of show you, I think, where that has come from and why we use, particularly in the United States, this term. If you look over time, now I've mapped here migrants as a percent of the US population between 1960 and say 2018, and you can see that growth, the inflection point was really 1990, which is also the year that we pretty much think we look to and say that's when globalization, modern globalization, really began. And you can see globalization's impact on the percent of migrants living in the United States. So 1990, remember that year. You see that same pattern, albeit in a slightly more complex way, in the percent of world population. You see that inflection point at 1990 also exists at the world level, and I've only mapped it here, so 2018. But the reason I'm focusing in on 1990 is not only is that the year where we started to really demarcate sort of modern globalization, it's also the year that the American Heritage Dictionary changed the word diaspora in the dictionary itself, and then the Oxford Dictionary changed afterwards. So in the English language, in the way we speak, our lexicon, the word diaspora was, before 1990, was spelled with a capital D only, and it was used to refer to the body of Jews or Jewish communities outside Palestine or modern Israel. But it was in 1990 that diaspora with a lowercase d was entered into the dictionary to mean a dispersion of a people from their original homeland, and is now referred to all kinds of groups of people. I really like the word diaspora because it refers to its etymology, as it comes from the Greek word, a scattering or sowing of seeds. But I think a more complex definition that I think gives us more of a sense of the political, economic, and social aspects of being in diaspora. Gabriel Sheffer, who's an Israeli political scientist, has this definition that many of us in academia use. Diasporas are social political formations created as the result of either forced or voluntary migration, whose members regard themselves as of the same ethno-national origin and who permanently reside as minorities in one or several host countries. Members of such entities maintain regular or occasional contacts with what they regard as their homelands and with individuals and groups of the same background residing in other host countries. So migration matters to more than just those who crossed a border recently. That definition is not just about those who crossed a border, It's about the subsequent generations, even born outside the country, who then still maintain those ties and that interaction with the country of origin. And this is one of the reasons why this is such, not only because the large number of people moving across borders, but also for the potential to engage multiple generations, that this is particularly important for the global economy. Remember, people can return physically or virtually. Diasporans actually contribute, as many of you know already, to the economy in lots of different ways. They send home remittances, right? They invest in countries and companies back home in portfolio investment. Many of them come back home and start a business themselves, for themselves or for someone in their family, or to build a business and then sell it off. Many people give across borders to charities. Many people come back home in volunteer programs to give back to society. And of course, just tourism itself adds dollars. Diaspora tourism itself just adds dollars to the economy. And so just looking at the remittance flows, I think you can see the money that's been sent home has done nothing but grow over time in terms of remittances. Foreign direct investment is really the only thing larger than remittances. The overseas development assistance does not anywhere near keep a pace to the impact that remittances play. And that's very significant in the United States, where money is flowing outside the United States into all these various countries that you can see around. And this is representative of our very rich immigrant history in the United States and current times. But going beyond remittances has been a thing that we've been working on, I think, in here at GW School of Business and the Diaspora Capital Investment Project with many different partners. And it really started with India in many ways. We're sort of studying as academics the sort of the psychosocial connections to diaspora and the economy. But it was President Obama that asked me and the team here at GW to really investigate the potential for creating an investment fund that would raise money from the Indian diaspora and invest in small and medium-sized enterprises in India that were in social impact industries. And so we went around and talked to the Indian diaspora all throughout the United States in focus groups. We outlined a large list of all the different Indian diaspora organizations, and we did a large survey for the White House, and the results became, and they took every single recommendation from the study, I think that's the only time that'll ever happen in my lifetime, and announced the U.S. Indian Diaspora Capital Investment Project when Obama visited India in January of 2015. This investment fund still exists today. It's marketed, it's no longer called Calvert Impact Capital, but Calvert Global Capital, and is a fund where funds are raised from the Indian diaspora here, and they particularly go into rural India in sanitation, education, and healthcare. But of course, diasporans do all kinds of other things. They go back and build businesses, like my friend here in Ethiopia, who turned an entire area that was almost 80% unemployed into a neighborhood that was almost completely involved in not only the construction, but the operation of a multi-story spa and restaurant and retail complex that he himself built after coming to the United States, becoming trained in cosmetology and learning a lot about the retail business. He went back and created this incredible little micro economy himself, just one example of the many diaspora direct entrepreneurs. Countries themselves, like Ireland, for example, or even developing countries like Rwanda, have created investment promotion agencies that promote diaspora investment back home and help those that want to invest back home, broker relationships, seek out capital, cut through red tape and government regulation, and so on. Diasporans also create businesses, particularly on the web, that are really transnational, that has a little bit of operations here and a little bit of operations there. This is a great example from Nepal of somebody that did that very same thing. Armenia has been very famous for raising hundreds of thousands of Armenians in diaspora to come back and volunteer in Armenia in sort of gap years and high school summers, so that they can, one, make good economic and social impact in the country, but two, also be more in touch with their country of origin identity. And of course, in one of the models that I think is really fascinating in India, the Sankara Eye Foundation, of course, is a place where a lot of diasporans send philanthropic dollars, but they've also combined that with a tourism model where the diaspora can come and stay at the Eye Foundation, volunteer their time and help, but also then contribute money later and become sort of part of the Sankara Eye Foundation family. And of course, diasporans are also big consumer markets. Jollibee's, which is a fast food restaurant out of the Philippines, actually became a global company just following their diaspora community around the globe. And even banks have looked to find where their diasporans live. This was a project our students worked on with the government of Tunisia that was identifying where their Tunisian diasporans lived in various different neighborhoods in Paris, and then took buses with loudspeakers on them throughout these neighborhoods promoting savings accounts back home in this particular Tunisian bank. So even services. And of course, immigrants have made all kinds of incredible global changing companies, many of them, of course, headquartered here in the United States. And we still see a large share of Main Street business owners who are immigrants in the United States in all kinds of categories. Because of all this economic power that diasporans have, the International Organization for Migration has actually created a website that helps support diaspora communities, help them learn from one another, and help connect home and host country organizations. This project, iDiaspora, is also something that our GW students have gotten to work on in projects here at the school. I think the world and the media often portrays migrants as someone that needs help, and that is exactly, absolutely, authentically true. But what we have also tried to point out is that migrants, wherever they come from, have incredible gifts of innovation, entrepreneurship, and capital, not just to help the new countries that they go to, but that they can then also contribute to development back home as well, whether they go back or not. This idea that capital, which is cultural, social, human, and financial, can play a very important role in business activity in today's global economy. So migration matters to governments and organizations all around the world. As I mentioned, and I'll close, GW has been very active in promoting the diaspora capital movement. In 2006, we created the Diaspora Research Program. That's a university level program. We have here in the School of Business, a Center for International Business Education and Research with a whole focal area on doing research, as well as teaching and outreach to the diaspora and other governments around diaspora investment and entrepreneurship. We were the first business school in the United States to offer a class called Migration, Identity, and International Business. Our students have worked on all kinds of projects, and I don't have time to go into each one of them listed here, but all around the globe, working for the U.S. Agency for International Development, the World Bank, the UN, as well as many national governments and the International Organization for Migration, all trying to find ways to promote, facilitate, and scale up diaspora capital. This is a place at GW where we have a large number of international students who come and learn about ways that their new knowledge, their new skills can not only benefit themselves and their families, but also their countries, new countries that they're operating in, as well as perhaps their countries of origin. It is truly Washington, D.C. It is truly a transnational space and university. Thank you very much for your time today. Back to you, Sanjay.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Riddle. And we do have So the audience, the conversation is going to kick off. So if you have any questions for Dr. Riddle, please post them in the Q&A box. I would be happy to pick a few of those. I do have a few questions of my own as well to ask you if you have a moment. So this is around the negative side, or in your research and your studies, have you seen any negative impact of immigration? We know of Indians who have made it big in the United States. There are a lot of Indian origin people who are now CEOs of US companies or global companies. So that's, of course, the positive side, but have you seen any negative impact as well?
Well, I think in many cases, one of the things that I would say could be considered a negative in terms of immigration in the United States is that we on the US side have a lot more to do, I think, and more resources to put in place to better welcome and settle and help settle, our immigrant population. That I too have lived abroad in a culture and country and language that was very different than my own for a significant period of time, and I know firsthand kind of how alienating that is. And so one of the things I'm so proud of to be at GW for is that our business school has created an entire group called Global, as I mentioned, Global and Experiential Education, where there is actually within that group a dedicated team that reaches out to our international student body. Our graduate students, or our student body, is around a third international students, and they come from all around the world. I mean, you really feel like the world is here in our hallways, the different languages that you see, the different cultures represented, that diversity is here. And so I think in many ways, institutions like a university setting, for example, have stepped in maybe where there might be perceived anyway to be institutional voids in that sort of reception. And that's one of the reasons why I'm proud to be at GW.
That's great to hear. And having been to DC myself, having visited over there a couple of times, I know it's a beautiful city. They're just, the influx of people from around the world, right? It's just amazing to see all of that over there, and truly diverse and vibrant city as well. So I think though I don't have any questions from the audience, so I think we are good over there. I think they are still absorbing the information that they have got from your presentation today. And I hope they'll ponder over this information and take the right decision and get inspired to make a move, right? Move possibly within the country, move across the globe, open up opportunities for themselves, and also facilitate opportunities or build businesses around the globe for others as well. So thank you for doing this extremely insightful presentation. This was extremely data-driven and extremely insightful. So thank you for doing that. To the audience, don't go anywhere. We still have more to go. With this, I'm gonna run my second poll for the evening. And then I'm gonna invite Susan Kessler, who's the Director of Graduate Admissions at George Washington University's School of Business, to tell us a little more about the business school. The attendees of this session are also eligible to get an application fee waiver from George Washington University School of Business, so GWSB. So please stay back. And with that, I'm going to launch the next poll of the evening, and also thank Dr. Riddle for taking out the time to do today's presentation. So thank you for being here, and please do take care. And we would love to hear, and I'm sure the audience would want to hear more from you eventually, and possibly as students at GWSB. So thank you for taking out the time to do this session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day. To the audience, the poll is live on the screen right now. This is about which program you are most interested in. So GWSB does offer a number of diverse programs. This is across accountancy, business analytics, finance, human resources, information technology, interdisciplinary business studies, international business management, project management, sports management, all of those. We have actually done a few sessions around these different topics as well in the past. We did a session around sports management a couple of weeks ago. That was a full house. We had over 500 attendees or 1,000 registrants. You can actually find the link for that on our YouTube channel. So you can look at Seed's YouTube channel and you can watch that video over there as well. So GWSB offers programs in all of these. These are MS programs. So please let us know the program which is of most interest to you. And we will shortly hear from Susan about the various opportunities and the admission criteria, plus the scholarship opportunities available to you to pursue any of these programs at GWSB. So please do let us know. All right, I'm going to keep the poll open for another 5 seconds. I see 75 of you have responded. So from the 300 odd people in the room right now, around 35, 80 have responded. So I'm going to keep this open for another few seconds. So if you haven't yet responded, please do so. Please let us know the program that is of most interest to you. In the meanwhile, I'm also going to find the link for the sports management program that we did a couple of weeks ago. And that was, again, extremely insightful session by a faculty who was at the Beijing Olympics at that time, and she spoke about her first-hand experience over there. So I'm also going to share the link for that in the chat box shortly.
I have shared it. I have shared it already.
Great. So that's in the chat box, so you can check that out recording as well at a later point. But in the meanwhile, please let us know the program that is of most interest to you at GWSB. I have around 90 responses, so I'm going to end the poll now and show the results right away. So great. So the audience, so I hope you can see the responses as well. So majority, around 20% of the audience are interested in business analytics as a pathway of study for the future, around 11% in finance, 11% in human resource management, 14% in tech, and we also have around 11% looking at masters in management, project management, sports management, and so on and so forth. So great. So audience which is interested in diverse topic areas. And with that, let me invite Susan Kessler, who's the Director of Graduate Admissions at George Washington University School of Business, to take us through, tell us a little more about the business school, and also share the application fee waiver code for the attendees of this session so that they can make the most of this opportunity and make the application to GWSB. Over to you, Susan.
Hi, everyone. I hope you are doing well. I just want to do a quick screen check and make sure that you all can see my slides all right.
We can.
Okay, great, Sanjay. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I hope you enjoyed the session with Dean Riddle. She's one of my absolute favorite professors and leaders here at GWSB. My name is Susan Kessler, and I am the Director of Graduate Admissions and Recruiting here at the George Washington University School of Business. And my team really has an opportunity to support all of our graduate programs. You know, from the minute we have a student that's interested in one of our programs, whether it's coaching on programs or whatever it might be, we really love supporting our prospective students and incoming students. So I'm going to walk you guys through a little bit about George Washington University today. The idea is really to just give you an overview of who we are. I won't keep you too long, but then I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. So there's three main areas we're going to go over today. It's going to be, we're going to talk about the school programs and our admissions process. I think one of the most important things to know first and foremost is kind of where are we situated within the United States. So for those of you who have visited the US, you'll be familiar with the Mid-Atlantic Washington, DC area. Dean Riddle was discussing earlier. For those of you who may not have had a chance to visit the US before, what you'll see is you know, a lot of our major cities are on the East Coast, as well as our capital, and Washington, D.C. is the capital of the U.S., and we're located right in the heart of Washington, D.C. You can see here, 𝗀𝗃𝗃 Hall, that's our School of Business. We're only about 5 blocks from the White House, which is, you know, our capital. World Bank, IMF, US State Department building, IBM, and as Dean Riddle mentioned, we're right on the tip of a new tech corridor that's being implemented in Washington, D.C. to support a variety of business sectors. So we're very excited to be a part of that. As far as our graduate school goes, we have about 3,500 students total in GWSB, with about half of those being graduate students, and then about a 50-50 split of our graduate students going into either MBA programs or specialized master's programs. Now, this is really special for one particular reason. When you come to GWSB and you're planning on doing a program with us, you're learning from faculty that have an expertise in their designated area. They're not just generalists. So whether you're looking at business analytics, whether you're looking at an MBA, whether you're looking at accountancy, I saw quite a few folks interested in accountancy. I was very excited to see that. there's something for everyone, and you're taught by faculty that really have a history and a passion and expertise in those areas, not just kind of generalist in the business and the business fields. When we talk about our rankings, we're also really proud to say that we're currently ranked #1 for international business among US institutions and #2 worldwide. We're also #2 for diversity within our programs. I believe Dean Riddle mentioned earlier that, it's really a global experience when you come to George Washington University, and it really is. You can be walking around campus, walking in the building, and hear, 3 or 4 different languages every single day of students who've joined us from all over the world. Now, something else that makes our school really special and that I really like to talk about is our community. So when you come to a graduate program in the US, there's lots of different support systems depending on the type of school you want to join, the university environment that you want to join, whether you're going to a big rural college or a state school, whether you're going to a small boutique college, or whether you're going to a private school in an urban setting. Every school has their own support systems. At GWSB, we focus on world-class curriculum, supportive admissions processes all the way through, really getting our students involved in experiential education and hands-on learning. There's nothing better in Washington, D.C. than to have an opportunity to get hands-on experiential education. And we're actually we have a whole department dedicated to that called Global and Experiential Education, and they're going to be doing a masterclass coming up in a few weeks. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But then we also have dedicated career services support for all of our business students. So some universities in the US support career services through a centralized system. For us, being a business school in the heart of DC, it's really, really important that our students have dedicated access to our own career services support, especially for our international students and domestic students as well. So we create community through quite a few ways. We have co-curricular roundtables, alumni meet and greets, peer mentoring, social events. There's always something going on at GWSB to provide you with an opportunity to network. One thing you may want to think about when you're thinking about graduate business school is the understanding that a graduate business education should really be twofold. Half of it should be what you're learning academically in the classroom, and the other half should be about your career outcomes and being able to provide you with an opportunity to be successful in the career that you're pursuing. So whether you're looking at George Washington or another university, whether in the US, the UK, Europe, abroad, whatever it might be, really think about how is that university supporting you, not just academically, but also going to be there for you in your career search and your career journey. The other thing I want to mention is that we do have a whole variety of programs that are STEM-based. I know when I visited India in the past, a lot of our prospective students were really interested in STEM-based programming. We're really excited to say at the graduate level for our school, we have a lot of STEM-based programs, including, I know, like I said, I saw some of you interested in accountancy. Our accountancy program now has a STEM track that our international students or domestic students, either one, can actually take advantage of. My husband is a recruiter for a consulting firm in accountancy here in DC, which is why I always get excited about that. But we have many opportunities for those of you who are interested in STEM. Overall, we have 13 specialized master's programs, so lots of opportunities from anything from applied finance to marketing, project management, sports management, human resources, lots of opportunities, and 20+ graduate certificates as well. Application processes, it's pretty straightforward. Really what we're looking for from a graduate business perspective is pretty similar across the board in the US, whether you're looking at our programs or others right now. A BA from a regionally accredited college or university, a strong GPA. A lot of schools in the US right now are GMAT, GRE optional. So if you're not excited to take one of those graduate management tests, Now is a great time to look at applying to graduate programs in the US, as well as an English language requirement. Our next deadline personally at GWSB is coming up March 15th. So if any of you are thinking about applying, we do have a deadline coming up in 5 days, but we'll have an additional deadline after that. So don't panic there. And again, we'd love to get to know you all better. If any of you are interested in following up after this meeting, again, the goal today was to introduce you to some of our faculty, help you learn a little bit about international diasporas, but also introduce you a little bit to the George Washington University School of Business and who we are. And again, we do have another masterclass coming up we're really excited about with our Global and Experiential Education Department, who can tell you about all the hands-on learning opportunities George Washington has to offer and kind of what's coming down the pike. Yeah, and with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Sanjay. Happy to answer any questions the audience may have.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for doing that. Susan, if you're comfortable, can we post the application fee waiver code in the chat box? Are you okay sharing that with the audience right away?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So audience, I'm going to post this in the chat window right now. Some of you mentioned that you're finding it difficult to post your questions in the Q&A box. If that's the case, you can also post your questions in the chat box, and I will pick up the right ones, the relevant ones to ask Susan. In the meanwhile, I'm just going to post the application fee waiver so that you can make the most and possibly start your application for GWSB today itself. So, okay, so I have posted the application fee waiver code in the chat window. The waiver code is 𝗀𝗻𝐺𝑊U203, so you can use that. And this is available for all the attendees of today's session. So thank you for attending and make the most of this waiver code. Susan, I do have some questions coming in. The first question I have is from 𝗀𝗻𝐺𝗂𝘁, who's asking about placements after doing MS. So I know the session which is happening on the 21st is going to talk about career services as well a bit, but if we can throw some light on the employment statistics, the career opportunities that the candidates can expect post doing an MS at GWSB.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say right off the bat, nothing is ever guaranteed in the US with business placements for international students. Like you really have to hustle, and work hard. But we're here to support you every step of the way. And I think that's the big difference is from day one, we're working with you on creating a US-based resume if you're looking to stay in the US or if you're looking to go back abroad somewhere else. We're supporting you in creating the sort of business environment that you need in order to get the job that you want. We have two parts to our career services department. So one is our career services advisors who work individually with our students in the industry areas that you're interested in being placed in. So they work really closely with you. They're open, during all regular school business hours for one-on-one appointments or virtual appointments, depending on what works best for our students, to help prepare you to seek out, prep, negotiate, all of those sort of things for placement opportunities. The other side of the house in career services is actually dedicated solely to creating relationships with employers for our students. So we have a whole team of about 6 folks who actually are going out in industry that our students are interested in. And this is all based on feedback from our students. Where do you want to be placed? What kind of company do you want to be placed in? What kind of industry do you want to be placed in? And creating one-on-one relationships with these companies to give you an opportunity to network with them, go for a career day at their organizations, those sort of things. But we always say, don't expect it to just be handed to you. We really expect our students to work hard, but we're your partner in that work every step of the way. And our placement rates are quite good. We actually have a dedicated career counselor for our international students specifically.
Awesome, that's great. And I see another follow-up question which has come up from 𝗀𝗻𝐺𝗂𝘁, but I'm going to take that up in a bit, which is about procedure to start the application process. But before we get to that, Susan, I wanted to ask you about the scholarship opportunities. This is also a question which has come up from Samruth, who's posted it in the Q&A box, who's asking what are the scholarship opportunities available for someone looking to do a MS in project management. I'm assuming scholarship opportunities are available for across programs. So if you can throw some light on that, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever you apply, you're automatically considered at our school, you're automatically considered for scholarship right out of the gate. So we do merit-based scholarship. So as you go through admissions committee for each program, you're automatically considered for XYZ scholarships. And that you know what your reward is as soon as you get your admissions letter. Now, there are a few programs that have additional scholarships that you can apply for. I know accountancy has a few of those, business analytics, there's a few programs there. Project management also does have a very good pool of funding. So if you're interested in MS in project management, it's a fantastic program. And they do have, a good pool of funding available. I would say you don't want to wait to the very end of a cycle to apply, because the earlier that you're applying, the more funding that is available.
All right. So if you're looking for a scholarship, apply early, but it may still not be too late. So there may be some opportunities still available. And that brings me to the next question from Dipali. And she's asking, what are the vital points to keep in mind when they apply to GWSB? And those who had asked about how to start the application, I'm going to post this in the chat box. I'm going to post the link for the application form to GWSB in the chat box, so you can use that. There are guidelines given over there on how you can start your application, use that. The application fee waiver code has already been put in the chat window as well. I'm going to repost that as well, so you can use both of those to start your application. But Susan, Dipali's question about what to keep in mind while making that great, amazing application to GWSB.
Yeah, so keep in mind what we're looking to do is to get to know you better as an individual and why you may be a good fit for that individual program. So one of the things we're looking for in your statement of purpose, on your resume, from your letters of recommendation are all like, why is this program going to impact you? And like, why is it important that you're doing this program? This is not like undergrad where sometimes, you may have a generalist degree or something like that. Like the focus of this program should be to move your career forward. So we want to see that you have an understanding of industry and a real reason behind why you're applying for this program. Now, that's not to say that you have to have been in that industry before. We have tons of career changers who are coming into the program, but we do want to see that you've done a bit of research on our programs. We want to see that you've done a bit of research on industry and kind of have a general understanding and passion and general interest in the program that you're pursuing, because it is a lot of hard work. So if you're not really excited for that career that you're going after, it's harder than if you really know that you want to be a part of that program. So we're just looking to get to know you a little bit better, professional, polished, strong resume, grammar, all of those sort of things. But it shouldn't be as scary as when you applied for undergrad. We're looking to support you.
All right, Susan, I do have a couple of questions which have come in the chat window as well. I'm going to take some of those as well. One question is around work experience. Is there a work experience requirement for any of the MS programs?
Not for the MS programs. Now, for our MBA programs, there is. You typically need at least 3 to 5 years of work experience. However, for our MS programs, you could be coming straight out of undergraduate, or you could be a seasoned professional, and the programs are appropriately catered for both.
Awesome. So no minimum work ex requirement for the MS programs. For MBA, you need, I'm guessing, at least 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And of course, average would be around 5.5 years. Would that be correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. And is a TOEFL, so is a language, English language test and a GMAT GRE score mandatory for any of these programs?
Not a GMAT GRE score. Those are all optional this year. However, a TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo score is required for all applications, unless you completed your undergraduate degree, say in the UK or in the US, or certain other countries, but those are required.
All right. So even if they have done their undergraduate education in India and have completed the entire course, was taught in English language and examinations happened in English, still a TOEFL or an IELTS or a Duolingo or test score would be required. Is that correct?
Correct. Unfortunately, so a lot of us are advocating to not need that, but the university standard is still that we do.
All right. And Susan, one question is around 4-year undergraduate degree. So 4-year and 3-year undergraduate degree. A lot of undergraduate programs in India are 3-year in duration. So are these people eligible to apply directly for a master's program, or do they need to have a 1-year bridge education or a postgraduate program completed before that?
Yeah, so this is something really, really important for all of you to be thinking about. Some schools within the US do not accept the India 3-year degree. And to Sanjay's point, you need that 4th year or additional 1-year tag on. George Washington University is currently accepting 3-year India degrees, where the equivalency would be considered a bachelor's in the US. So it's really, really important, whether you're thinking about us or other schools within the US, that you do your homework and make sure that your degree is appropriate for the requirements of that school or university. But for GWSB, the 3-year India degree, we review all of those, make sure that the A levels are at the appropriate kind of score, and then you're eligible, to be considered for application. We have very, very few students who don't meet the requirements.
All right, I think that's great to hear. And I think with that, we have answered all the questions. So there were some profile specific questions as well. I don't think this would be the right platform to answer profile specific questions. So if you have any of those profile specific questions, you can write to the university directly. You can write to Susan directly. She had shared the email address earlier. I would also request her to post that in the chat window for everyone to get it. And with that, we are actually significantly over time for the session. There's a contact email address, which I'm going to post in the chat window for everyone to see right now. If you have any follow-on questions, please do reach out to GWSB, clarify your doubts. And if you are looking to make an application, I have posted the link to start your application in the chat window, along with the application fee waiver. We may also send you the same over WhatsApp, so you can make the most. You'll have the link handy on your cell phones as well, plus the application fee waiver code as well over there. So if you're looking to make an application and study your program, study your studies at GWSB this year, then this could be a great opportunity to make the most of it. With that, I want to thank Susan for taking out the time and facilitating this session to get Dr. Riddle to do her presentation on migration matters. That was extremely insightful for me as well. Thank you, Susan, for facilitating all of this and taking out the time to connect with the audience.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sanjay. It was lovely to chat with all of you. And, if you have any questions, please do hesitate. We love hearing from our prospective students. So thank you again for your time today.
Great. Thank you again, Susan. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the audience as well. Keep safe, take all the precautions, and all the best for your future career journey. Take care.